Welcome to Warehouse Automation Matters. I'm your host, Mary Hart, and I'm here with Kevin Hume, co founder and project executive at ThruPut Partners, LLC. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kevin.
Thank you, Mary. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining. Can you start by telling me a bit about ThruPut Partners and how you got into the industry?
Yeah, sure. So, I've been involved in supply chain before supply chain was even a word, if you will. And after over 30 years of seeing the same design methods over and over, we knew our clients deserved a better approach, an approach that really accounts for the dynamic market evolution, demand volatility, and what we see now, an abundance of emerging technology and automation opportunities. We're reconsidering the design and implementation process across supply chains because our customers need new thinking. There's a ton of talk right now about resiliency. We're working to build operational flexibility and scalability by melding the best of both agile and waterfall deployment strategies within our methodologies to design new facilities. We actively redesign through deployment, leveraging technology and automation capabilities versus relying on initial projections and historical data. Our designs were able to make adjustments and adapt along the way to deliver a robust, dynamic end result. Like all great firms, we listen, but we design to deploy, recognizing that business requirements constantly change and customer market shifts are real. So our work has to meet those expectations, and we leave our clients with adaptive solutions that really support their future needs.
And you talked about the market shifting. What are some of the biggest ways that traditional supply chain design limits flexibility? And how does that impact warehouse operations?
Yeah, such a great question. It's super timely right now with with the pace of technology. The supply chain landscape is really, in my opinion, it's littered with the remains of silver bullet solutions that promised everything. What collectively as throughput, what we've seen work are thoughtful and tailored collections of technologies chosen based on actual needs. These examples have really outperformed what we characterize as kind of the one and done or all in approaches and that overall one size fits all mentality. Some examples of the limits that I see in that traditional approach to supply chain design, it really starts with a limited design analysis. I kind of alluded to that earlier. And that's really about leveraging the same data structures used in past customers without consideration for this particular, our current client and their business and data, and how, most importantly, it could be adversely impacted by those legacy approaches to the overall data analysis. So what you're looking at is in that historical, some of the shortcomings, designing for average and a reliance on fixed equipment, a real failure to model for tomorrow. Tomorrow is really defined by us as rapid change and dependent upon yesterday's requirements. If there's one thing I think that's most important here is data analytics is great for a base, but not reaching for the stars with it. It comes into the sensitivity analysis to that data. And then the last comment on that, I think, is going to be, the fear of technology versus leveraging systems and integration capabilities to balance and maximize operations no matter what the day demands. Another comment on that would be the waterfall approach to system integration. I'll just go from a technology perspective. At best, that waterfall approach to system technology, it creates delays in operational deployment. At worst, it can create project stagnation and delays waiting on the technology stack to catch up with us. So waterfall is something that while we still find value in it in some elements, we really try to embrace agile technologies. And I'm going to speak more about that, I think, as the opportunity presents itself.
In fact, agile methodologies have transformed industries like software development. How can those principles that you just talked about be successfully applied to warehouse operations?
Yeah, the agile methodology allows us to quickly pilot a specific design on a smaller scale, allowing the opportunity for real life conditions to go ahead and take effect and illuminate any of the shortcomings that we have in the design. In our design efforts, we typically design and deploy in an overall strategy of phase sprints. I like to call it simplistically, what do we do now? What do we do next? And what do we do later? And there's agile sprints within each one of those. So the do now, the step one, the foundation, time frame there, 2 to 4 months. The objective there, you're establishing the infrastructure for change, small pilots to see what works and learn from the mistakes. So it's getting current on releases with respect to the technology footprint from WMS, warehouse execution, warehouse control, establishing that foundation. Consider new integration strategies when legacy integration exists between the ERP, the warehouse, and downstream integration components. iPaaS or similar technologies. Those pilot initiatives are where you at least start considering something like iPaaS, or what are the overall timeframes relative to. Another element in Do Now is establishing a PMO program in order to begin tracking efforts, issues, and timelines. So we have the information and the infrastructure, the overall operational and reporting infrastructure needed to make timely decisions and to keep progress on schedule. Mary, it's so much easier to do that when you're on a smaller scale and working through that overall PMO component. I think PMO, program management office, is one of the areas that we really help our clients with to be able to establish that early on in the process. Do it early as the complexity and the coordination starts to ramp up. You'll be able to increase with the experience that you line up with. Another element of Do Now is going to be to identify, socialize, and deploy these smaller pilot program efforts. Take the opportunity, as I mentioned before, to learn from those mistakes on a smaller scale. That takes us then to step two. So after you've embraced all of those elements I just talked about, then what's do next? So do next is that incremental phase. It's a time frame anywhere from typically 4 to 12 months, and it's where we deliver real change and impact to the operation. So that's where we're starting to pilot more point-specific automation and robotic concepts into production. What happened that you didn't expect during that? What are the avenues to overcome? Where's the data at? Is the data that we evaluated consistency with the performance? If it's not, why not? Where is it coming from? Most importantly, how does this scale? What are the challenges to be able to putting it to scale? Take all of that, validate the data, validate the scaling strategies, work that through within that PMO office and the coordination of it. And now we've got real working mechanism, a cohesive team to then take us into that final part, step three, the what do we do later? That's the transformational stage where we're taking more, time frame here, 12 to 18 months. It's where we want to start to connect and orchestrate some of those elements of automation and automated material handling that were really put together for more of a pilot perspective. This step can frequently involve that's the opportunity for a greenfield facility or significant changes and expansions to an existing site. You're going to scale up those previous solutions and look at investing in automated material handling and sortation that leverages all the lessons learned from the previous processes. So that's it. We scale that agile process, do now, do next, and do later.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Can you share an example of a company or warehouse that has successfully transitioned to a more agile supply chain model, and what were the takeaways?
Wow. So that's a fun one. So I think one of my favorites, I'll give you the background. The background, five facilities. Each one of those facilities had a manual, pretty discrete, specific operation, limited from a technology perspective. Those five facilities had really limited visibility to the orders and the ability to potentially move orders within the facilities, or even the technology capability to look at where they were at within the day. So from a throughput perspective, our solution, we were able to come up with a design that consolidated those five physical facilities across multiple sites into a single unified greenfield site that provided the ability to support retail replenishment, distribution, and e-commerce fulfillment in addition to subscription flows, all within a single technology platform and a single operational environment. We looked at extensive data analysis and, most importantly, a sensitivity, the what if analysis, to ensure that we had a facility of the sufficient size and we had sufficient material handling capabilities to be able to support the ebbs and flows of the requirements. From a technology perspective, warehouse management, warehouse execution were absolutely essential to be able to balance the concurrency of working in a single facility at the same time with different operational flows, from distribution, subscription, e-commerce, all these different elements. It's vital to have the effective functionality that we needed to do that. Then obviously, when you combine all of these work streams, you've got to be able to leverage automation and, most importantly, sortation for higher volume picking, packing, and shipping. So we also leveraged things like in-motion weigh scaling and print and apply to be able to further take labor content out of the operation. And the last component, distributed order management, was also an essential element to be able, from a future perspective, allow this facility to, and the technology platform, to leverage additional acquisitions for this company to take on additional sites, and then have the flexibility to be able to move orders from one to another facility as supply chain challenges came up. They were able to effectively move orders within those facilities. So some of the key takeaways that we saw in this operation is the sensitivity analysis that we did, really looking at, and we continue to look at this operation with the customer. And the sensitivity analysis, many of the scenarios that we ran, we encountered them to some extent in the real world in the subsequent years after the facility initially went live. So that was that element of being able to not solely rely on historical data, but to have forward-looking discussions and develop some simulated data of what if and what that analysis would look like.
So let's talk about market shifts, as you spoke about earlier. We know they're inevitable. What steps can warehouses take today to prepare for these uncertainties?
Yeah, I think some very specific steps that I think can apply virtually to any operation. It's got to include, one, focus on the development and, most importantly, retention of a core workforce that performs the critical tasks and can be supplemented to a degree with more untrained labor. But development and retention of labor, despite the fact that make no mistake, there's a continual force to reduce that labor content. We get that, but you've got to focus on retention of the labor that you do need and the quality of it. The retention aspect speaks for itself because of the high demand for what that remaining labor content is going to be required to do. So you then take that labor content and you arm them with the tools that can help to scale up volumes and designs with minimal labor, things that support those initiatives, things like automated pick engines, robotic packing, integration technologies, all of those elements. And the last thing is then to be able to leverage supply chain technology platforms in order to balance orders, wave batches, and to be able to achieve more consistent flow and avoid backlogs within a facility.
Perfect. So we talked about scaling. How can warehouses strike the right balance between stability and adaptability, especially when they're scaling automation solutions?
I think the bottom line on that at a 40,000 foot level with automation is that automation must fit the activity in the operation, but more importantly, within the overall process. So what that means is if you automate one step, make sure that the infeed to that step and the outfeed coming out of that step balance out, and you can see a net overall staff savings from it. It sounds very simple, but I can't tell you how many times we've been brought into projects where folks are struggling with automation and some of those basic precepts of what's the rate coming in versus the rate going out and the balancing component of that. I think primarily that comes from exceptions to processes, but you've got to identify that up front, and that's the first way to do it, is to balance the ins and the outs, if you will. I think another element with that, really important to remember at that higher level, is quite honestly, automation can run 24/7, but staffing that's a whole nother story in terms of how you do that. And it goes back to those previous comments about that staff retention and quality. Understand where the skilled staff is most critical and design to fully leverage them in related value and activities, not in secondary cast off thoughts of things like second handling, inventory reconciliation, travel, those components. It's got to be really value added activities that they wind up supporting in the post automation component.
So, what are the biggest challenges that companies face when they're trying to implement more agile chain strategies, and how can they overcome them?
I think there's a couple there. For me, working, a lot on the technology side, right off the bat, upfront infrastructure. We've got so many customers that have clear business case and opportunities and payback with us within a specific problem footprint. However, when I get called in, the payback and business case then becomes more complicated when they start considering the infrastructure elements, such as the existing technology footprint, also facility constraints, and the disruption to existing operations.
Mhm.
So there's three elements of infrastructure. Up front, you've got to start identifying what those particular challenges are. So it's absolutely important to identify the automation and those opportunities, but you've also got to really focus on what are those constraints and how you're going to be able to support that. All those elements, they can be addressed, but they're all elements our clients don't necessarily have top of mind going into the automation design efforts. So that's what I want to point out is number one, infrastructure. Number two, has been around forever and it's time. Duration has always been a challenge. However, the increasing pace of technology that we've seen in our lives in the last 20 years, it makes it even harder to do that. The best deployments occur when advanced planning and communication make the mundane things like contract approvals and on schedule funding, so there's no disruption within the service provider mix. It sounds so basic, but I can't tell you the one for one day delays that we see from things that aren't really that complicated, provided we've got effective program management that's leading and putting these things in front of the people to be able to keep effective execution. So, and then I think the last thing, I've mentioned it, I think a little bit earlier, and that's the impact of legacy infrastructure, and specifically within legacy infrastructure, how long it will take for that existing technology infrastructure to be able to prepare to meet the requirements of the incoming automation that we're looking at.
So, where do you see the future of supply chain agility heading, and what trends should warehouse operators be paying attention to?
Well, it starts with the obvious one in terms of labor content reduction. There's gonna be continued progression to more automated labor processes, reducing exposure to errors and increasing cycle times within the continued innovations that we have that minimize travel and reduce labor. Some examples of what I'm talking about with this, I think a big one is convergence. We're just coming off ProMat, and boy, convergence is a word that just kept coming back to me. Specifically, what I saw in automation providers and large system integrators was showing a lot more what I'll call complementary solutions that are merging things like high density storage with batch picking and sortation, and then coupled with semi-autonomous vehicles that are supporting the downstream sortation and transportation between picking cells. So there's a lot of convergence that we're seeing now in those automated technologies. Another one I just have to put out, AI, artificial intelligence. You can't seem to get through an article or discussion related to supply chain without the AI word coming up. I'm going to force myself, if I'm going to throw out the AI term, I'm going to provide specific examples of how we at ThruPut, what we're actually doing with it or how we're seeing it used. So I'm gonna save that until I have an opportunity. And
Sounds good. If you had to give warehouse leaders one piece of advice on embracing agility in their operations, what would it be?
you're never done. Whether you're searching for clues and errors, constantly running an affinity analysis or looking towards a greenfield transformational automated facility, supply chain leaders are always looking for the next set of challenges. And, I'll go back to that sensitivity analysis that I talked about with our client. It's really about continually looking forward, and you're never done. Supply chain has never been static. We've applied the use of evolving technology, and we have a lot of creative ways to approach operational challenges. I think the last word I'll say on that is healthy skepticism. You need, especially today, healthy skepticism while focusing on adaptable technology that can evolve with your shifting business requirements. I'll go back to what I said initially about the one size fits all thing. It's, you've got point specific pieces of automation and robotics. Yes, they work. Bring healthy skepticism of how they will effectively integrate into your operation.
Thank you. So, as a final wrap up question, where can our listeners learn more about ThruPut Partners? And of course, how is it that you're using AI at ThruPut?
All right. So let's talk about the AI element first. So a good example of that from a design perspective is what we call an affinity analysis. We've been doing an affinity analysis before I knew the term AI. That's been around at least 7-10 years. An affinity analysis is more than a Pareto. Pareto, the 80-20 rule, identifying those 20% of the items. It's kind of static. It's multidimensional. What are those 20 items? An affinity analysis looks at the transactional association of items within orders and across orders. AI can leverage what we call dark data. Dark data within WMS is specifically that transactional activity. Mm-hmm. And it looks at that transactional activity at the same time it looks at the source of the orders. Leveraging AI, we're able to go much deeper and run many more cycles of what opportunities in affinity. And affinity here is another word for proximity of one location to another to reduce travel. So we're leveraging AI in some of those design elements within an affinity analysis to be able to get more and better insights, and most importantly, a heck of a lot faster than what we've done in the past traditional approaches in terms of how we've done it. I think another one that's emerging with a couple warehouse management system providers is that same kind of dark data element, if you will, only this time that dark data is actually security cameras that are watching movements across the entire facility. AI is able to take that data and mash it up against the transactional record of what's actually occurring out on the floor. The net result of that is a much faster turnaround of customer service issues in terms of mispicks and errors and when they occurred. What used to take hours to days of going through transactions and comparing that to orders is done in minutes to hours now, leveraging AI. And both these examples, they're both happening now in the real world. So some specific AI examples in the real world.
So tell our listeners where they can learn more about ThruPut Partners.
Sure. I think the best thing is our LinkedIn page. We are posting our material, our thoughts, our perspectives a couple times a week on the LinkedIn page. So it's a great way to keep up with us and take a look at, what we see as insight into what's happening in the crazy paced world of supply chain strategy and technology.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Mary.
And thank you to our listeners. We're here to help you move what matters in your warehouse with unmatched flexibility and unlimited throughput.